The act of piracy has always fascinated humanity. It's an odd appeal for humans who have increasingly organized and lived in more structured and regimented societies to retain a romantic notion of the brigand who lives on the edge of right and wrong and flouts the rules that bind the rest of us. From Robin Hood to Captain Hook, Blackbeard to Davy Jones, and even Long John Silver, popular culture is rife with examples of those bold individuals who struck out on their own to make their own unique way in the world. Of course, the reality is often very different from the stories, movies, and Hollywoods. Fundamental aspects of what we understand pirates to be are often completely manufactured for popular consumption, up to and including that pirate voice and common phrases that date back only to the 1950s with Robert Newton's acting in the movie adaptations of Treasure Island, Blackbeard the Pirate, and Long John Silver. Even the idea that pirates had abandoned civilization entirely isn't accurate, considering how many pirates during that golden age of piracy were actually agents of governments who directed them against rival nations. It tarnishes the mystique a bit, but no one really seems to care. The romantic narrative is so powerful it wins out every time. So what happened to the mythos of the pirate as humanity left the bounds of Terra? Did people simply accept that the days of adventure on the high seas were long over? Of course not. That wouldn't be any fun. As people began to spread across the stars, or were sent there as troublemakers from Terra, the reputation of what life was like on the outskirts of civilization followed. Instead of the high seas or the Wild West, the place where people could go to avoid the trappings of order and possibly seek great fame and fortune was the Periphery. It's a reputation that is not unearned. As we saw with the previous videos on the Periphery nations, people often left the Terran hegemony and later the Inner Sphere for many reasons. Often those reasons were related to wanting to seek a new way of living. For some, that meant creating a new civilization with alternate societal norms. For others, the lack of any sort of laws or oversight from an authority allowed for all sorts of debauchery. The realms carved out of space far from the reach of consequence are often referred to as bandit kingdoms or pirate enclaves. Instead of running ships with sails and stealing Spanish gold mined in South America, they hijacked jump ships, pillaged colonies, and often played the antagonist to the Periphery and even Inner Sphere houses who sought to build and develop economically. As much as we often look at piracy through the rose-colored lens of popular culture, the reality of piracy is often brutal and exposes just how difficult life can be out in the Periphery. It's sad that desperate men do desperate things. In many cases, desperate pirates have done inhuman things, not out of desperation, but out of the macabre norm of taking what you want from others without any empathy. While obviously not every pirate group or enclave is going to operate in the same manner, for the sake of creating a digestible short history, we need to generalize a bit. I will do my best to provide some examples that demonstrate the variety of experiences one might have as a pirate or even the victims of piracy within the Periphery. Our first description is from Periphery Privateers, written by Fiona Del Rio in 3024, and it does a good job of defining your typical Periphery pirate. She writes, "The typical Marian pirate crew is a mixed lot, ranging from gentlemen and ex-nobles through impoverished farmers gone bad. There are also a good sprinkling of individuals, both male and female, who could only be characterized as the lowest scum. For all this, most were moral enough among themselves. They were starfarers, bands of brothers and sisters, with few illusions about what life was really like or where it would lead them." Paula, Lady Death Trevelyan, once ruler of the Periphery bandit kingdom called the Tortuga Dominion, described the life of a Periphery pirate as much less romantic than imagined in the media of the past and in Hollywoods popular across the Inner Sphere for generations. The typical pirate is someone who is unable to live an honest life, for any number of reasons real and imagined. She implies that there are just some people incapable of playing the game of life and seek to survive another way. Often that involves brutality and harming others. Concepts that stir most people, like justice, equality, and freedom, fall on deaf ears when presented to a pirate. You're much more likely to get their attention with words like profit, pleasure, power, and pillaging. With that bleak description, one might imagine pirate organizations to be pretty chaotic. However, much like with the seafaring pirates of old Terra, the pirate organizations of the Periphery tend to have a fairly refined order of operations and rules. It's a little bit like imagining your average anarchist collective coming up with a long list of bylaws just to keep the organization from falling apart. The hypocrisy is baked into the nonsense. Going back to Fiona Del Rio's description of the Marian pirates, she writes, "A modern-day hegemony privateer, ironically enough, is a democratic sort of organization. Articles of plunder drawn up between the captain and his crew, many of which are on file with Comstar, attest to this fact. Discipline, often brutal, and obedience, absolute, were considered essential to effective shipboard life. And more often than not, anyone found to be derelict in his duty suffered an unimaginable fate." This situation was not entirely one-sided, however. If the crew decided that a captain was neglectful of his duty, that man or woman could soon find him or herself walking out the nearest airlock without a pressure suit. The rules that organize a pirate system can be plentiful or few depending on each, though they usually are there for two purposes. The first is to make sure it actually functions, and the second is to maximize profit. Let's look at a few of the common rules that existed to make this happen. The first is equitable division of plunder based upon shares. Crew with specialized skills could receive a share and a half. Doctors, IT folk, senior mechanics, etc. Younger crew, usually under 12, would receive a half share until they were granted full share status. Officers received double shares. Increased reward came with increased responsibility to make sure the money was flowing in, and the crew was staying away from retribution or justice. Anyone receiving significant or debilitating harm during the raid would receive a double share as compensation, missing arms, legs, so on and so forth. And 1/10 of a share was withheld as a form of pension for retired or those permanently incapable of going on raids in the future. Many of these ideas are ancient and were simply carried forward into the raids between the stars and planets. It's a rather surprising level of order and discipline for what is often portrayed as a wild and uncivilized group of brutes. Maybe the ability to function in a society with rules and responsibilities is more widespread than first thought. Interestingly, Paula Trevelyan is keen on pointing out that much as the pirate kingdoms and organizations take flack as being brutal and uncivilized, the so-called great houses of the Inner Sphere, and even the Terran hegemony, had many skeletons in their closets. Front entries, balconies, and strewn about the many worlds they ended up dominating. Perhaps that's a good reminder that there are few leaders in the history of the Inner Sphere that don't have blood all over their hands. One of the most common ways people interact with pirates is through raids on jump ships. Due to the limitations of technology and the time it takes to recharge batteries using solar sails, a recently jumped ship is ripe for the plucking for a pirate force that can quickly react and lay in wait for a jump ship to wander by the jump point. One interesting aspect of hunting down jump ships is the continued reverence for the jump ships themselves. While damage is inevitable in disabling and forcing your way onto a ship, care is taken not to completely destroy jump ships. This is predicated on the understanding that the jump ships are the lifeblood of the pirates. If you destroy the objects that are bringing you wealth, eventually the wealth stops being delivered. Additionally, a jump ship is so valuable that if they start going missing, it could bring unwanted attention in the form of major house military units or mercenaries being paid to crush your little pirate venture. The other common pirate pastime is the planetary raid. Though valuable resources on the planet can far outweigh anything found on a jump ship, the risk also goes way up. It also tends to require a larger force, which also increases costs and the risk of disaster. The use of subterfuge is common, as the less time a planet has to prepare for the pirates' arrival, the better for the pirates. Once landed, shock and awe is the order of the day, as rapid strikes on key locations can prevent the locals from rallying in defense. Then it's a matter of taking what you want, or need, and getting out of Dodge quickly. Many pirates have been overconfident and stayed too long on a planet only to find themselves under the knives of locals or sitting on their hands when the fuzz dropships start to land. Now that we know what a pirate is and a little of how they see themselves in relation to others, let's look at the results of their work. There are countless incidents and reports that cover the gambit, from polite encounters with roguish but professional interstellar highwaymen to bloodthirsty murderers who bled the ground red. Let's dig into some examples. The incident near Butte Hold. Trying to avoid the brunt of the ion storm had consequences. If the crew had known what those consequences would be, they would have tried their luck jumping through the storm. The ship, Demeter Empress, was not equipped to run from the oncoming pirates, and it definitely wasn't a warship. And so fate was tempted, and in the midst of the ship's repairs, a huge jump ship that looked like it had seen dozens of battles began to close on them. If there was any doubt as to the ship's intentions, the gigantic grinning death's head emblem painted across it put it to rest. Moving across the Empress like a predator toying with its prey, the pirate ship stalked. The Demeter Empress's captain did what he could to buy time and make their capture more difficult, but ultimately it was pointless. Being unable to jump from the system meant that they would eventually be cornered. Accurate incoming fire obliterated the modest defensive weaponry. Then, just moments after that, missiles corkscrewed through the silent darkness of space to smash into the Empress's bridge. The light armor buckled and was torn away by soundless explosions that vented the contents of the bridge out into space. Equipment, personal goods, and the crew scattered in all directions, spinning off into eternity. Defenseless and now without leaders, the ship was ripe for the taking. A boarding party cut through the airlocks, and to the credit of the surviving ship crew, they fought tenaciously in those first few minutes with the small arms they were able to procure from a security locker. Unfortunately, outnumbered and outgunned, it was a battle that quickly ended. One pirate lay dead when the smoke cleared, and the Empress's crew surrendered, hoping that in doing so it would save lives. It cost them theirs as the boarding crew killed them all. The remaining passengers were now at the mercy of these pirates dressed in black. They were searched, quite roughly, and anyone who complained or tried to hinder their brutal work were killed as a warning to the rest. Once disarmed and robbed of their possessions, the passengers were brought back into the jump ship's cafeteria where a man was waiting. He was slender, wearing all black clothing including multiple layers of silk, and he was cleaning his nails with a large knife. There, the passengers were treated like cattle, some picked out and separated from the others. 4 women were chosen and carried off to the pirate's ship. The fate of the others was likely death. The story of what happened on that ship will haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. The inhumane conditions and unspeakable torture had left them physically and psychologically damaged. The leader, who we now understand to be the infamous Red Jack Ryan, was the source of much of the misery. This account was adapted and edited from testimony from the Comstar Investigative Committee on Periphery Depredations, March 13th, 3020. Red Jack Ryan is an interesting case study for just how bloodthirsty and reckless a pirate can be in the 31st century. Born in the Lyran Commonwealth around 2988, every early indicator would have suggested that Ryan could have led a rather uneventful if privileged life. However, like so many who end up seeking a life on the outskirts of civilization, Ryan had trouble playing the game. His corner-cutting and lack of ethical boundaries led him to being kicked out of the Commonwealth Military Academy after being caught doctoring evaluation reports. Running out of options for living a legitimate life, Ryan left the Commonwealth and headed out into the Oberon Confederation, where he bribed his way into an officer's posting. His unit ended up being loaned out to the Lyran Commonwealth in 3017 to act as a garrison unit on a Merrick planet of Fianna, which was hotly contested on the border. Not burdened by things like ethical boundaries or a moral compass, Ryan took advantage of the opportunity to fleece the local population through blackmail, threats of violence, and eventually actual violence when the people rose up in revolt. Cities were sacked, crowds gunned down with fire from battle mechs, and the situation rapidly spiraled out of control. At one point, a large fusion power plant was damaged in the fighting, and it began to spew hazardous chemicals into the atmosphere. Eventually, Ryan and his forces ended up having to retreat to an old Star League storage site, where he found stocks of old chemical agents. Ryan proceeded to leverage their possible use against the people in order to procure dropship passage off-planet and jumpship travel out of the system. Details are fuzzy as to what happened during the extraction, but we do know that at some point those chemical agents were unleashed onto the populace near the starport. Between that and the damage caused to the power plant, millions of people on the planet ended up dying before Ryan's rampage was over. Unable to return to the Oberon Confederation and being chased by authorities from the Free Worlds League, Ryan headed out into the Periphery. When he discovered the world of Butte Hold, it became the hub for a new life of piracy and terror. Raiding planets, hijacking jump ships, and seemingly having no limit to their violence and cruelty, Ryan and the other pirates of Butte Hold earned their scummy reputation many times over. It's unclear if Red Jack Ryan ever saw a form of justice after his long career of carnage and suffering. By 3049, when the Kellhounds were actively hunting down pirates, led by one of Ryan's sons, the arrival of the clans threw everything into chaos. The clan forces made quick work of the pirates who stood little chance against their advanced technology. His daughter, Susie Morgaine Ryan, survived, and sources have suggested that she was orphaned during the clan invasion. That would suggest that Ryan either died during those initial raids or shortly after. No matter how he ended up shuffling the mortal coil, Red Jack Ryan stands as one of the most notorious and callous pirates of the 31st century. Very few who had any interaction with him would say that the galaxy isn't a better place without him. The Tortuga Dominions. It's difficult to quantify just how little the Tortuga Dominions are appreciated by their neighbors. Be they Taurians, Filtveltians, or from House Davion, the prevailing opinion will be that those from Tortuga are vile monsters who deserve the justice that would come from being wiped from existence. The Dominions can be traced back to the Reunification War, which resulted in the Federated Sun's 237th Light Cavalry Regiment, which was sent in on a pointless, suicidal incursion into Taurian territory. Instead of dying for no reason other than to move some pompous officer's dessert cart 30 light years closer to victory, the remnants of the unit decided to jump into the unknown void. They ended up finding a small habitable world within a few generations that started as piracy for survival had become a way of life. Piracy in the region was so lucrative that colonization of nearby worlds could take place. Word of success brought new recruits as well as a need to keep feeding off of neighbors. The larger the kingdom, the more grand and bold the excursions into House Davion and Taurian space had to be. The succession wars were a boon for the Tortuga Dominions, as House Davion had much bigger fish to fry than some upstart pirate kingdom in the Periphery. The pirates took advantage of the lack of accountability by launching grand raids into Davion and Taurian territory. Stealing everything they could, the Tortugan pirates were ruthless. An eyewitness description from an attack from one of the Tortugan Jolly Rogers ships reads, "They didn't even need our oars, not with all the stuff they were sitting on. They were just looking for someone to play with, and did a flyby. Blew pure hell out of half of our envirodomes, stole everything we brought to the surface, and wrecked pretty much everything else. Then they took off into the wild black yonder and left us survivors to clean up the mess." Eventually, the cries for help from the planets continually being raided were too much to ignore. Prince Ian Davion hired the Wolf's Dragoons to finally bring justice to the region in 3007. Dragoons Gamma and Delta regiments launched a punitive raid against New Haiti, one of the Tortugan homeworlds. The pirates were well equipped, but nowhere near as capable and geared as the Dragoons who cut down the pirates in an encirclement. Though not completely eliminated, the raids hobbled the pirates on New Haiti for a significant period of time. During the years of the Word of Blake kerfuffle, the pirates of the Tortuga Dominions ended up in the odd position as the closest thing to a centralized authority in the region. Planets which had been continually raided over the years started asking for protection. It was a lucrative new market to enter, though it did result in plenty of pirate-on-pirate action. By 3079, the Tortuga Dominions were in danger of becoming an actual state with previously unheard-of responsibilities. Actual acts of piracy began to decline, and it's reported that this led to a significant decline in morale. Piracy in recent history. The Word of Blake really did a number on everyone across the Inner Sphere, and large groups of pirates also felt the impact. Organizations like Takalmi's Escorts, Halcourt's Destructors, and Calderon's Commandos suffered significant losses due to Blakist attacks and ambushes on raided planets and ships. Raids, like the one seen in 3077 on the Combine world Nowhere, are still common, but the days of grand ventures deep into House territory became increasingly rare. The arrival of the Snow Ravens in Outworld's Alliance space significantly curtailed pirate activity in that region. However, on the other side of the Inner Sphere, the collapse of the Free Worlds League created new opportunities for piracy in the absence of a centralized authority. Some of my favorite pirate stories come to us from variations on the clan dark-cased theme. Rumors of genetically engineered monsters piloting strange mechs and battle armor armed with tentacles are popular in holovids and with kids around campfires, but it's difficult to nail down any precise locations or times for such attacks. It's always, "I heard this from a friend who heard it from a friend." Then again, as one writer put it, "Out in the periphery, the only thing stranger than a tall tale is the truth." Piracy at the dawn of the Oakland era. With the collapse of the HPG network, the lack of swift communication has created opportunities for pirates to function more freely without consequence. By the time news of a raiding party reaches anyone capable of doing anything about it, the pirates can be long gone. Planets cut off from communication from governments stationed far from them ended up turning more toward local authorities, which sometimes meant warlords or pirate groups that offered protection in exchange for payoffs. Even groups sent to deal with pirates sometimes ended up blurring the lines and becoming somewhat pirate-like themselves. The Second Liao Dragoons were sent to hunt down pirates on the border with the Periphery, yet their behavior in these systems led to accusations that they were actually nothing more than state-sponsored pirates themselves. Reports from the Franc Reaches describe the Dragoons as bandits who have looted and rampaged across multiple planets. The Capellan Confederation dismisses these reports as biased, and that the Dragoons were actually helping raid pirate enclaves. The truth may be one or the other, or somewhere in between. However, it's not all bad news for the law-abiding citizenry. For example, the 7th New Samarkand Regulars is a unit that was created following the Second Combined Dominion War. They've shown professionalism and diligence in action against pirate forces on the borders of Combined space. Down in the Periphery March, the Anjin Huerto Periphery March Militia LCT has seen significant success against piracy in the region where they operate. Their presence is enough to scare off pirates who would much rather seek easier targets for their pillaging. Their conduct in sweeps of frequent lanes of piracy has yielded results for planets near Filtvelt territory. Even Clan Hell's horses had to get into the pirate hunting business. They've retrofitted their Kappa Galaxy to be primarily focused on chasing down pirates and protecting lesser worlds within the horse occupation zone. In one notable example of just how difficult a task this can be, the 12th Rangers Cluster spent 4 months traveling between remote settlements on Novel Cressidas in order to track down a pirate group which had gone to ground on the planet. Not wanting to miss out on the fun, a battalion from the Fiefdom of Randis, Thumper Assault Regiment, stomped through the Tortuga Dominion's home turf in order to hobble the pirate activity in the region. Though the future of any specific band of pirates is entirely up in the air depending upon local conditions, the emerging and continuing conflicts between great powers across the Inner Sphere promises that piracy will continue to be an issue for the people who live near or in the Periphery. States that ignore pirate activity risk spreading a contagion of uncertainty and doubt from the peoples affected. Do you have a favorite pirate band in the BattleTech universe? Are there players out there who have mech armies painted up in pirate covers? I'd love to hear about it. Big thank you to everyone for watching. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit all the buttons so I can have some happy brain chemicals and YouTube knows to spread the thumbnail around a little bit more. Much love for the channel members and Ko-Fi folk who are directly supporting the channel. This would not be possible without you. Until we meet again, take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.